Hi, welcome back. So we're on to chapter 3, the first adventure. Gertrude was waiting for them at the garden gate. They saw her as they ran down the cliff path, her cap and apron glimmering white in the darkness. Her face was rather white too, but the children didn't notice that. She wanted to hug them when she saw them running swiftly down the path because they were back safe once more, but they had been out far too late and ought to be scolded instead. "Wherever have you been?" she asked in what she hoped was a scoldy sort of voice. But it couldn't have been very scoldy because Humphrey seized her arm and hugged it. "Over the hills and far away," he said softly. "Go on with you," cried Gertrude, trying to look severe but not succeeding very well. "You're naughty children. Yes, you are. All of you. You know very well you oughtn't to be out so late without asking first. And I'm very angry with you. Yes, I am. And it's a good thing it's holidays and you can sleep longer tomorrow and you don't deserve any supper. So there." "Oh," said Sheila, in a sorrowful sort of voice, and it wasn't of supper she was thinking. "Oh," cried Peter, and forgot in an instant his beloved ship. "Oh," said Humphrey, and turned away his face. "Oh," sighed Sandy, not feeling hungry any more, and hid her face in Gertrude's waist, for suddenly they had remembered. Supper time was Mother's time. Mother always came in at 7 and said, "Well, infants, what's for supper?" And she never forgot to ask, even though they always had the same thing. Peter always had a handful of raisins, 2 chocolate biscuits, big ones, and a glass of lemonade, gassy. Sheila always had 2 rounds of hot buttered toast with jam, raspberry or strawberry, but never blackcurrant because she couldn't bear it, and a cup of chocolate, not cocoa, because that is not at all the same thing. Humphrey always had an orange, an apple, and a glass of lemonade made with lemon and lots of sugar. Sandy always had Rice Krispies with golden syrup and a glass of milk and a banana. But Mother never forgot to ask them what they would like, though Cook, I'm afraid, had got into the habit of getting the trays ready before the children had chosen. But you could hardly blame her for that. You or I or anyone, except the children's mother, would have done the same. But then Mother was Mother, and quite different from anyone else. But tonight there wouldn't be any Mother to say, "Well, infants, what's for supper?" Nor tomorrow night, nor for goodness knows how many nights, for Mother was ill. And though no one had breathed a word about a nursing home, the children had seen Gertrude packing night dresses and dressing jackets and brushes and combs and toothbrushes and all the things you take away with you. So it hadn't required a great deal of cleverness to guess where she was going, especially as it was not like Mother to go away without saying goodbye. Besides, there was Father wandering about with the most worried expression on his face. Yes, they had been very unhappy indeed, but then, with all the excitement of Peter going into Radcliffe by himself, and the magic boat, and everything, it had all gone out of their mind. And now the worry had come back again, and nothing, not even the magic boat itself, seemed to matter very much. They walked quietly up the garden path, Sandy dabbing at her eyes in the darkness. Sheila went straight through the hall and upstairs. "I'm going to bed," she said in a choky sort of voice, standing in the middle of the staircase. "I don't want any supper." "Nor me," said Peter. "Nor me," echoed Humphrey and Sandy. Gertrude stood at the foot of the stairs to prevent the others from following Sheila. "You go straight into the dining room," she said, trying to look as fierce as a turkey cock, but only succeeding in looking like a fluffed-out sparrow. "I've promised your mother I'd look after you the same as if she was here, and I mean to do it." And she hustled them into the dining room. It was cosy in there, with the curtains drawn. The 4 little trays stood on the table, looking as jolly as ever. It was difficult to believe that Mother wouldn't come in at any minute. Sheila's tray was yellow, and the china was yellow with white spots. Peter's was grass green with white spots. Humphrey's was sky blue with white spots. And Sandy's was deep rose pink with white spots. Mother had brought them each a set from Italy last year, and very pretty they looked. Gertrude said, "Get on with it, do. It's ever so late. Miss Sheila will be down in a minute." Peter stared down into his green tumbler, watching the tiny bubbles rise and break on the surface. "The gas will soon be fizzed out," he said, and lifted the tumbler to his lips. "Better for you without gas," said Humphrey, and reached out for the sky blue tray. Sandy said nothing. She was already working the syrup amongst the Rice Krispies and admiring it as it glistened like gold on the pink plate. Gertrude didn't waste much time upstairs, for presently Sheila came down, looking a little red about the eyes, but quite cheerful. She lifted the chocolate skin on her spoon and set it down neatly on the yellow saucer. The children ate and drank steadily and felt better for their supper. Then Sheila said, "You nip up first, Sandy, and don't take all the water." "It's Huff's turn to go up first," objected Sandy. "No, it isn't. I went up first last night." "Well, it's a shame." Sandy was pouting. "Why have Huff and I always got to have our baths at night? Why can't we have them in the morning like you and Peter?" "Because you've got to go to bed clean," Sheila explained. "Catch you getting up half an hour earlier for a bath," grinned Peter. "No arguing," Sheila declared firmly. "Up you go, Sandy, and Huff's coming up in a quarter of an hour, and if you're not out, we'll come and drag you out." "Pooh," said Sandy, but she went quite quickly. Sheila was standing by her bedroom window. She was feeling fresh and bright after a quick cold wash, and now, standing there and brushing her hair with a fresh breeze coming up from the garden, she didn't feel in the least bit like going to sleep. Sandy lay curled up in bed, one plump arm thrown up over the pillow. The bedclothes trailed over the floor. Sheila went over and, picking them up, folded them neatly over the foot of the bed. Too hot, she told herself. Mother would have taken off her blanket. And at the thought of Mother, the tears came pricking into her eyes. Sleep seemed more impossible than ever. She came over to the window again and, dropping on her knees, put her elbows on the broad ledge. From the garden came a dozen sweet smells. Sheila closed her eyes and wondered whether she could distinguish them. She was quite sure she could smell roses and night-scented stock. She sniffed. Lime or honeysuckle? She couldn't be quite sure. But she was certain of the tobacco plant. It had such a strong and heavy perfume. She sniffed again. A quite different smell of tobacco told her that Father was coming down the garden path. Yes, Father, and with him another man. She stared intently into the darkness. The other man was Uncle David. They came on steadily, and underneath Sheila's window they stopped. There was a wooden garden seat just there, and the two men sat down. They were still talking, and Sheila went on hiding in the darkness. She was thinking that the minute they stopped, she would call out quietly and ask if there was any news of Mother. Father and Uncle David went on talking, and Sheila went on waiting. She saw Uncle David get up and put a hand on Father's shoulder, and then, quite suddenly, she understood that they were speaking of Mother. Sheila's heart gave a sudden, sickening drop. "Seems queer it all coming on so suddenly," said Uncle David. "I don't seem to have got used to the idea yet." "That sort of trouble often comes with a rush," Father said drearily. "You know, David, she'd be all right if she'd only give herself a chance. But she won't. It's the children. She keeps worrying about the children." "Well, why can't she see them?" asked Uncle David. Father shrugged. "Not allowed. The surgeon says she's not strong enough and it would upset everything. I don't agree, though I think it would do her good." "Well," said Uncle David reasonably, "after all, the surgeon knows best." "No, he doesn't," Father said in his most determined sort of voice. "I know best because I know Mary better than anyone else. If she wants to see the children, she'll fret herself sick until she does, and the minute she's seen them, she'll settle down and get better." Sheila didn't hear any more because Father got up quickly and walked away. She went over and sat on her bed. She wanted to think. From the other bed came the sound of Sandy's soft, regular breathing. She sat perfectly still, trying to make up her mind. The other doctor had said no, but Father said yes. Father loved Mother best in the whole world, and Father said yes. She got off the bed, crept along the passage, and pushed open the door of the boy's room. "Peter," she called gently, and then, a little louder, "Peter." Peter lay fast asleep with one hand under the pillow where the magic boat lay. She went up and touched him gently on the shoulder. He came awake immediately, his fingers tightening around his treasure. "Listen, Peter," she said, in a quick, urgent whispers, and she told him what she had overheard from the window. Peter sat up in bed and stared at her, his face very white in the moonlight. He couldn't bear to think that Mother was so ill. He couldn't bear to think that she was wanting them and couldn't get better without them. It was like a pain in the middle of his chest. He felt he would do anything to help Mother get better, anything at all. He felt little and powerless to do anything. He buried his face in the pillow so that Sheila couldn't see his distress. Something moved under the pillow, moved like a bird. Peter sat up again in the moonlight. He was smiling. He said, "We'll go and see Mother, all of us. Let's wake the others." And then, very anxiously, "You're sure we ought to go? Sure?" She nodded. "I'm going to wake Sandy." Sandy didn't understand at first. She was having a very satisfactory dream about a flying boat that was made of pink peppermint rock. But when at last she did understand, she put on her dressing gown and then sat down in the moonlight to put on her slippers. Humphrey came awake at once. He understood the minute he opened his eyes, because this was, in a way, continuing his dream. He had been dreaming of Mother. He had been dreaming that he was a bird flying across the sky, straight to Mother. Sandy came into the boy's room, tying the girdle of her dressing gown, and the 3 children sat on Peter's bed and waited for him to speak. "We're going to see Mother now, this very minute. I don't know if the ship will take off from a room, but we're going to try." "Oughtn't the children to be properly dressed?" asked Sheila a little anxiously. "Who's going to waste time dressing when Mother wants us?" asked Peter. "And what's the matter with dressing gowns? And anyhow, it's as warm as toast." "Hot or cold toast?" asked Sandy, who was always interested in food. But none of the others even heard her. Peter put the magic ship in the middle of the floor. It looked incredibly tiny, lying there on its side. Staring at it, the children wondered whether the adventures of the day were not all a dream, and whether, even now, they were not in the middle of some dream. "But we don't know where Mother is," Humphrey said at last. "I don't think that matters," Peter replied. He went over and put his hand on the head of the golden ball. "Please take us to Mother," he said. The 4 children fixed their eyes on the boat. Was it growing? Really and truly growing? Or were they only imagining it because they wanted it to happen so much? They could hardly breathe with excitement. Suddenly, Sheila was sure. She went over and threw open the window as wide as it would go. The 4 children stepped inside the boat. It raised itself gently from the carpet and nosed towards the window. As they went through, Humphrey stretched out his hand and caught at a bunch of rambler roses that nodded against the wall. In a moment they were sailing up into the star-pricked sky. The boat flew steadily onwards. After a while, the children felt it slacken and sink. Down, down went the boat, and settled as gently as a moth. The children stepped out onto a wide veranda. They stood silently until the boat was no more than a toy, hardly to be seen in the shadows of the veranda. Then Peter picked it up and put it in his pyjama pocket. Right in front of him rose the bulk of a high, dark house. Here and there a window shone yellow where a light had been left burning. "I wonder which is Mother's room," whispered Sheila, and tiptoed in the shadow, trying to find out. The window of a softly shaded room opened onto the veranda, and Sheila crept towards it. Very stealthily she peeped inside, and then, with uplifted finger, she beckoned the others. Holding their breath, the 4 children stared in. It was Mother, lying in the narrow white bed, but a Mother they hardly knew, with her bandaged head and no smile on her pale face. A nurse stood by the bed, her cap and apron very white in the dim glow. She was speaking, and the children could just catch her words. "Try to sleep, Mrs. Grant," she was saying. "You've simply got to give yourself a chance to get better." Mother answered, but in so low a voice that the children could not hear what she said. But the nurse replied briskly, "You shall see them as soon as you're well enough. That's a promise. Now you must do your bit by trying to settle down for the night. That's the first step to getting well." She smoothed the already smooth pillow and drew the neat quilt a tiny bit straighter. "I'll just put your flowers out for the night," she said, and stepped out onto the veranda. Would she step to the right or to the left? If to the left, she would step straight into the middle of the children. They crouched, flattened against the wall of the house. She came out, humming a little tune under her breath. She glanced sharply to the left, as if a little uneasy, and then moved towards a little cane table that stood on the right. Having set down the flowers, she stood for a moment, looking over the quiet, dark garden. Then she went inside again, leaving the veranda window ajar. Sheila, watching, saw her stop for a second by the bed, and then disappear, closing the door gently behind her. The 4 children looked anxiously at each other. Crouched flat against the wall, Peter whispered, "Ought we to go in?" "It's what we've come for," Sandy reminded him in as low a voice. "She looks awfully ill," Humphrey said slowly. "We might upset her or something." Sheila wrinkled her forehead and said nothing. It was her idea, and she felt responsible. Absently, she whistled a tune. It was a trick she had when she was thinking deeply. It was their favourite tune, Bobby Shafto. Mother had sung it to them hundreds of times. Watching, The children saw Mother raise herself very slowly and carefully in bed and look steadily towards the window. It was as if she was looking straight at them in the darkness. She was smiling, and in spite of the bandage, she was once more the mother they knew. "Children," she whispered, "where are you? I know you're there. Come in. Oh, do come in." Sheila pushed open the window and tiptoed up to the bed. The others followed, making no sound in the quiet room. "Darlings," said Mother, and lay back, smiling, on the pillow. Sheila said, "Mother, darling, we oughtn't to be here at all, but we wanted to see you terribly badly." "You mustn't worry about us," Peter said, "because we're managing ever so well. Honest, we are." "We had our suppers just the same as usual," Sandy said. "Good," murmured Mother in her weak voice. "I thought you'd like to know," Sandy added. Mother smiled feebly. "But we all want you to get well quickly as well. We all want you to get well quickly as quickly." That doesn't make sense. "But we all want you to get well quickly," Sheila said earnestly, "and come back to us the first minute you can." Humphrey said nothing. There was nothing he could say because his throat felt choky, but he went right close to the bed and laid his cluster of roses on Mother's pillow. She turned her head and smelled them. Her eyelids drooped over her tired eyes. Sheila led the others to the window. "Goodbye, Mother, darling," she said. But Mother didn't answer. Her eyes were closed, and her gentle breathing told them that she was fast asleep. Outside, on the veranda, Peter took the boat from his pocket. "Home," he said. Flying swiftly homewards, Sheila said, "I wonder whether she'll think it was a dream." "I expect so," Peter said, "but it doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters is that she's gone off to sleep." "There are the roses," thought Humphrey, and said nothing. Sandy, too, said nothing. She lay curled up at the bottom of the homeward flying boat, fast asleep. "I saw them," Mother kept repeating the next morning. "I saw them as clearly as I see you." "A dream," Nurse's face said as clearly as a face could speak. "Of course the children came," said Mother, answering the look. "I don't know how, but I wanted them, and there they were. Besides, there are the roses." And there's the nurse carrying the roses. That's the end of the chapter. All right, see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.